All right, let's begin. Welcome everyone to Team Topologies, organizing for flow and continuous delivery of value. We begin with introductions with a poll question to know our audience. We have a few of those sprinkled throughout this webinar to make it fun and interactive, and providing you with the actionable information that you can start to apply immediately. After that, we will bring up the familiar structure of development team, the agile roles on a team, and discuss the impact of Conway's law on system design and how organizations might be overlooking this important concept. If you're new to agile, some of these concepts might be fairly new. And if you feel that I'm going too fast, just stop me or raise your hand or post a question and I'm happy to answer. From here, we start to look at how to identify cognitive load, its impact on team productivity, some recommendations on reducing cognitive load and creating an environment that promotes the team first thinking. Next is an introduction to the 4 key patterns called out in Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pace's book, Team Topologies. A short description of each pattern along with key characteristics that would be followed by 3 modes of interaction among teams. We'll wrap up this topic by returning back to the roots and embracing the 3 ways of DevOps, which is flow, feedback, and learning through experimentation, and then open it up for Q&A. Here's a brief intro about me. I'm an enterprise agile coach. I'm the founder of 10 Agile, which is a SAFe Gold partner. And I'm a certified trainer on Scaled Agile 5, have been teaching SAFe courses since the 4.0 days. I'm passionate about training and education on technology and agile related topics. I'm happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm always up for a discussion on anything agile. So here our first poll question of the day. Go ahead and open a browser, type in ahaslides.com/10agile, and pick one of the categories that most closely identifies your role at work. Thanks for taking the poll question. We have a few Scrum Masters. Well, we have one Scrum Master / Project Manager, Program Portfolio Manager, and Agile Transformation related and Agile coaches. We've got the majority of those. So I'm expecting a lot of questions around the Agile Transformation aspects. I'm happy to have you all join. And we have participation from one other. So let's dive in. Here's the familiar agile team construct that you would have been introduced in an agile seminar that you may have attended, or if you've been involved in the agile work. I'm assuming that you're familiar with the basics role on an agile team, the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the team. So with that background, here are some basic responsibilities. If you go to scaledagileparamework.com, you'll be able to look up some of the basic information about these roles. Scrum Master, as you probably know, acts as the servant leader, facilitates creating a safe environment for the team, and promotes agile practices. Product owner acts as the customer for the team, owns the backlog, and is responsible for prioritizing the work for the team. And the rest of the team could be comprised of development resources, QA, UI, SMEs, and they estimate the work, they commit to work in smaller chunks and take those through completion. So let's take a look at an organization structure which might look something similar to what you see on the screen. Now, this is where Conway's law assumes importance. Melvin Conway found that an organization that designs a system defined broadly will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. And this is based on the reasoning that in order for a software module to function, multiple authors must communicate frequently with each other. Therefore, the interface structure of a system will reflect the social boundaries of the organizations that produce it, across which communication is more difficult. So if I take you back one slide, imagine if you have a team in the PS organization area. It may be fairly easy and perhaps a part and parcel of their culture to be able to reach out to other teams within this social construct. But it's going to be a tad bit more difficult. Might they have a dependency on the infrastructure family, the AWS, or the legacy family? Just the way these organizations have been logically arranged, the teams have been logically arranged, Conway found that it has a subtle impact on the design of the software. So for example, sales, if this is how a sales organization has been set up, the software that comes out of it would try and recreate the pattern. So the question that we are asking here, is there a better way that is not available to us, or is there a better design not available to us because of the way we are organized? And if you see the communication structure, which invariably translates into a software design, the theme topologies that we're going to discuss later today will hint at some of the interaction modes that can help work around this limitation. But before we discuss the team topologies, there's another dilemma that is inhibiting the team performance. And that has to do with our familiar agile team construct. So if we're zooming into the team, which is responsible for estimating the work, creating a plan and committing to that plan. And if you're aware of the Tuckman stages of team formation, which indicates that a team goes through these 5 stages as we get a group of people together and get them organized to be able to perform some activity which would be a value add. So the team members get together in the forming stage, get introduced. There's a bit of bumping of elbows in the storming stage. And working agreements are set up during norming. And finally, they get to a place where they feel comfortable knowing each other, understanding each other as part of the team, and they're able to perform to their best capacity. When the team objectives have been met, the team is adjourned. So with that context, what we're looking for is an identification of the cognitive load, which is defined in these 3 basic categories. Now, the cognitive load is the total amount of mental effort that is used in working memory. So for a development team, this cognitive load could be characterized in these 3 broad categories. You could have intrinsic cognitive load, which is a fundamental knowledge of the language used to write code. You could also have extraneous cognitive load, which is the knowledge of the environment in which the development team is operating. And that might indicate having an understanding of the server configuration, understanding the batch scripts, etc. And the third category is the load that is germane to the problem statement, and it relates to the aspects of the task that will amount to value creation. So when we're trying to create a team-first environment, we're trying to minimize the intrinsic cognitive load as well as the extraneous load. You could do that by training on the language and having a good choice of technologies, hiring for culture fit, investing in pair programming. The extraneous load could be reduced by automating as much as possible and minimizing the team distractions, which leaves the most amount of mental capacity available to value delivery. So a few other approaches to create this team-first thinking environment and reducing the cognitive load can be done by creating teams that are small, which can foster trust. Because small teams, and especially the long-lived teams, if the teams do not have a lot of churn, they're able to set in themselves in a particular pattern and maintain that pattern, embracing diversity, and restricting the team responsibility to match the cognitive load, limiting the number of domains that are being worked on by a particular team. Teams own the entire software from development all the way to maintaining the software. Creating a team-first working environment, minimizing the distractions, and changing the management style to focus on the outcomes. Another aspect is to create a platform that's designed to reduce the cognitive load for a team building software on top of it. We also are borrowing a concept from the development world. And if you've had a prior life as a developer, you'd easily recognize the term API, which is the application programming interface. Essentially, it's the specification on how methods would interact. They define that in the interface specification. The input-output parameters, the various ways that you're going to call the method, and what kind of output you could expect off of that method. So we're borrowing this concept from development and applying that to the team to understand that the teams can also specify a few attributes that can help other teams better interact with them, such as the code that the team is responsible for, any versioning methods, the versioning software, the assets that the team is versioning, a wiki page on the specific documentation around the software that team owns, the principles and practices that are being utilized by a team. Is it a Scrum team, a Kanban team? What's their preferred way of working? What kind of communication tools they'd like to use? Maybe they're working on something that requires the entire team to swarm. And just the way you have a status on the messenger tool of choice, you're busy, you're available, you're away. You could have something similar that talks about the current work that the team is currently working on. And anything else that the teams need to use to interact with other teams that they have dependencies on. So we've talked a little bit about the cognitive load. We've talked about the three categories of the cognitive load. And in order to try and create a team-first environment where we can have the team make use of the most mental capacity that they have available to focus on items that are germane to the problem. The question I'm asking here is, which cognitive load is reduced by automation? So Yep. Go to you. I already see a few answers coming in. Let me add another 30 seconds. And most likely you could see the check mark next to the correct option, which is the extraneous load. In automation, what it ends up doing is it allows teams to focus more on items that are germane to the problem. They don't have to recall or they don't have to remember the exact um, scripts, the commands that they have to remember in order to load their batch scripts. All they have to do is write the code, and if the entire delivery pipeline is automated, that code will go through the build process, all the test cases associated in making sure that the verification validation checks are passed. And ultimately, the code is compiled, run through those test cases, and lands in the production systems. So there's a level of predictability that is afforded by automation. And we're taking the human error, the human fat fingering out of the equation, which allows the available mental capacity to focus on value creation. So yes, automation is essentially reducing extraneous cognitive load. Thanks for taking that survey. Let's keep. All right, so let's talk about the 4 team topologies that Matthew Skeleton and Manuel Pace have talked extensively in their book, Team Topologies. And these topologies are the most familiar patterns that they've seen in the enterprises. They're also advocating that if you have teams, that when you find that they're a mix of these topologies, try and see if you can organize teams in these 4 patterns. Any more will add on to the confusion. They've seen these 4 patterns to be the most familiar and most effective at creating value. So let's jump in. The first is stream aligned teams. These teams are aligned to a single valuable stream of work, which could be a single product or service, a set of features, a single user journey, or a single user persona. And as you start to get acquainted about these stream aligned teams, you might find them very similar to feature teams. And they mention very explicitly in the book not to compare these or use feature teams analogy as a yardstick for stream aligned teams, because it's going to get you into a pattern which is counterproductive to getting benefit from the stream aligned teams. And they'd like you to associate the stream aligned teams, continue using the term stream aligned because it allows you to focus on 2 specific aspects. One is the concept of value stream, which is where we like these teams to contribute the most. And the other concept is that of flow. As long as we have teams that are working and there's continuous flow, the arrival rate and the departure rate and the work in process are all managed in a smooth harmony, your stream aligned teams are going to be producing at their highest capacity. So they're empowered to build and deliver business value quickly and independently without requiring handoffs to other teams to perform parts of the work. And this is the important part here. As much as possible, these are full stack teams. They don't have dependencies. In some of the behaviors, you'd see minimal handoffs, ideally 0 handoffs. They produce a steady flow of feature delivery. They fail fast based on feedback. They have an experiment, learn, and adapt approach. They're also addressing the tech debt that would originate as part and parcel of working on that software. And they collaborate with other topologies that we'll discuss. Next up are enabling teams. These are comprised of specialists in a given technical or product domain. They cross-cut the streamline teams. They research and try out options, have a very strong collaborative nature, and they apply the servant leadership to team interactions. You might also be able to analyze enabling teams as teams that are focused purely on a component, and some of the behaviors also point in that direction. In addition to that, these teams are also bringer of good and bad news on the technology lifecycle. They are usually ahead of the curve. If there's a new piece of technology coming in, a team of specialists is going to try it out, understand the feasibility, the scope of where this new technology can be applied. And they're essentially curator of appropriate knowledge to promote learning across teams. Then we have complicated subsystem teams. These are building and maintaining a part of the system that depends heavily on specialist knowledge. In fact, all team members are specialists in a given area of knowledge. And their goal is to reduce the cognitive load of streamlined teams. In an enterprise, you'll find these teams are far fewer compared to the streamlined teams and perhaps some of the enabling teams. By numbers, they are the least as far as all the teams are concerned. Some of the examples that these teams could be working on: face recognition engine, a mathematical modeling team, a reconciliation algorithm team. These teams are purely focused on that specific area of knowledge which requires a specialist. Some behaviors that you would find: high collaboration during the early exploration and development phase, and then they would move away and do their work as specialists involved in that area of knowledge. The delivery speed and quality measures are higher compared to streamlined teams. And that's a key aspect here because they're highly focused on providing a quality measure for the complicated subsystem that they're entrusted to. And the prioritization of features is essentially driven by the needs of streamlined teams. So you can see there's a producer and consumer relationship between the subsystem teams and the streamlined teams. Lastly, we have platform teams. And true to the definition of the platform teams, they are offering a service. They're essentially encapsulating smaller pieces of work that can be offered as a service to multiple teams. These services are being designed for ease of use, fit for purpose, and reliability. And they're essentially offering these services where they can even support multiple SLAs. You could have a premium level SLA with a particular team, which would require these platform teams to be more hands-on, and other teams could essentially have a more hands-off approach. And herein lies the advantage. The autonomous delivery teams can make use of the platform to deliver product features at a higher pace with reduced coordination. So if you have a web services team, fits right in that category. Some behaviors that you might identify with platform teams: strong focus on usability, reliability, and fit for purpose. And they may even consume their own services, thereby leading by example. They have a strong collaboration with streamlined teams to better understand their needs. And there's fast prototyping and fast feedback on what works and what does not. So I've taken you through the four team topologies really quickly. Which team topology do you think most closely resembles your team? Let's see if the slide refreshes on your side, and if you can provide me a quick answer on which one do you most closely resemble. All right, let me open it up for another 30 seconds, see if others can participate. And these numbers fit right in line with what I've seen with most organizations. The number of stream-aligned teams is typically higher. I'm actually seeing the number of enabling teams are much higher over here. But I suggest you to run this survey in your organization, and you'll find the number of stream-aligned teams is probably the highest. Next up would be enabling teams. Complicated subsystem teams, there are very few. True to their definition, these are the kind of teams that are working on these highly complex subsystems. And they may even exist for a given duration, where then after the work has been accomplished, they are disbanded and the resources go back into either the enabling teams or the platform teams. I see a comment there. For some reason, I don't see the polls. The polls are actually not part of Zoom. You just have to go to ahaslides.com/10agile, open up the browser window, and you should be able to participate. Another comment I see, that's probably because most of us are coaches. The teams we coach are all in the, are in all these categories. That's a very good observation. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I would imagine the same. Great. Thanks for participating. Let's go back and take a quick look at some of the interaction modes that can be utilized with these 14 topologies. First up is collaboration, working closely together with another team on defined areas. And this requires tight coupling, as is evident from the icon describing the collaboration team approach. Another interaction mode is X as a service. There's the consumer-producer relationship where you're consuming or providing something with minimal collaboration. And the third one up is facilitation, helping or being helped by another team to clear impediments. So we'll go through these and talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each interaction mode. I see some additional comments in the chat window, so let me address those. Daniel says, if a team is building a custom authentication service for use by multiple products, what type of team are they? If it's a custom authentication service, I'm going to rely on the term service, and my answer here would be it's a platform team, purely because it's being used by multiple products. So they're providing a service that should fit in the definition of a platform team. What about a UX team? Yeah, and that is where I'm trying to reason if those teams have resources that are better utilized when they are spread out and they've been assigned to individual stream-aligned teams. Remember, the stream-aligned teams, we're hoping for those teams to become full stack teams. And if you have a UX team, are they truly working on something that is highly complex, or they're organized in that way because they have limited participation during the product lifecycle? And I've seen that happen with most organizations. That's where I try and question if the UX team is better off having those resources split across multiple streamlined teams. Yeah, the assumption that I'm making here is the teams by default, the way they are structured today, are not going to be a nice fit for each of the topologies. We may have to peel back the layers of the onion and try and see where we can make adjustments. You may have a stream-aligned team that has a pocket in there which is working on a complicated subsystem. If that is the case, then the output of that streamlined team is going to be drastically reduced. Maybe it's not a bad idea to review the skill sets within the team and reorganize. So as you go through looking at the various team topologies, you may want to pick up the organization structure, the current team configuration, and see if there are adjustments that have to be made. Now the question, those platform or UX team, how do they manage their work? Do they have their own story and features and Kanban board, etc.? Yeah, that's a good call out. We would probably need to start asking those questions and have an understanding on how they're managing work. All right, let's jump into some of the advantages and disadvantages of each interaction mode. Collaboration, the biggest advantage is rapid innovation and discovery with fewer handoffs. Because there's tight coupling, you're going to have the best use of resources from both the teams, and the number of handoffs are going to be fairly reduced. The downside of that approach is that we need more detail between the teams. The cognitive load goes up. Both the teams have to get to the same page, and there's probably a bit of understanding that needs to develop. There's going to be a possible reduction in output during collaboration compared to before, and responsibilities are going to go up for each team. Because of the disadvantages, where the constraint that is put up with this collaboration method is that you should use this at most with only one other team at a time. And typical uses are streamlined teams working with the complicated subsystem teams, with tight collaboration, working with platform teams, and even the complicated subsystem teams working with platform teams. If we have X as a service, then there's clarity of ownership and clear responsibility boundaries. Because now there is no overlap and there is no tight coupling. There's reduced context that's needed between the teams, so cognitive load is also limited. The downside is that there's slower innovation and danger of reduced flow if the boundary or API is not effective. The constraint here is a team should expect to use this mode with many other teams simultaneously, whether consuming or providing a service. Because there are clear responsibilities set up, you don't run the risk that you did with collaboration. And then typical uses, you'd find platform as a service or component as a service being offered. I see another comment indicating all good callouts. Last year, all of our UX folks, we pulled out of the feature teams and put them on their own independent team. Not ideal in my opinion, like you said, reflects the org structure, not given much opportunity for collaboration. Absolutely, yeah. I couldn't agree more. Thanks for the comment, Alicia. Finally, let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of the facilitation mode. In this mode, as you can see from the overlap between the enabling team and the streamlined team, this indicates that there's probably some kind of blockage that the streamlined team is struggling with. And the enabling team, with their specialists and experts coming in, can help unblock and get rid of the impediment to increase the flow. Detection of gaps and misaligned capabilities of features in components and platforms. So now you're getting assistance from a group of experts coming in and trying to figure out what best they can do to enhance the flow. The downside is that it requires those experienced staff members to not working on building or running the things because they're assisting another team. And the interaction could be awkward. The team might not perceive the assistance that is being provided as so, and there may be a sense of insecurity within the team. A constraint is you want to expect to use this mode with a small number of other teams simultaneously, and whether it's consuming or providing the facilitation. So a use case is enabling team that's helping a streamlined team, a complicated subsystem team, or a platform team. And here's our next poll questions. Which team interaction mode have you utilized with other teams? This is a multiple choice. So if you've used more than one mode, please do indicate that. And I'm going to open this up right now. I'll add another 30 seconds. Great, fantastic. So I see collaboration and facilitating have almost have identical votes. A little less than that is X as a service, and then there are some other collaboration modes as well. So with this backdrop, having an quick intro into the team topologies and interaction modes, we're now taking a step forward, identifying the next generation operation model, and also looking back at the 3 ways of DevOps, which is systems thinking, optimizing for fast flow, feedback loop, your development is informed and guided by operations, and a culture of experimentation and learning. And some of the next steps that I would advise is to start by identifying the team topology and interaction with other teams. Your teams, the ones that you're coaching or acting as a product owner or perhaps the Scrum Master, may fit in one of the topologies discussed here, or they may be a combination of those topologies. So you might have to identify what's the closest topology that the teams that you're working with here. Then identify your value stream that the team supports. So have a better understanding of the system, the end-to-end system that your team is supporting. Identify capability gaps, and you may need assistance with experts to come in and look at some of the gaps that might exist. And finally, define your team API and practice the interaction modes. With that, I will open it up for questions. We've had a few comments along the way, so thanks for indicating those. If you have specific questions, please add them to the Q&A section or the chat window. Yeah, I can go back into the team topology slide. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our website. And you'll also receive an email with the link to the recording. Great. I don't see any questions or any comments. So if you do have a question that you might think later on, do send us a message. I appreciate Oh, there is one question. How do you see the IVV testing team in which topology? Um, that's that's a that's a question that probably requires trying to look at some of the behaviors and characteristics of those teams, and see which topology they probably come the closest to. Is there a complicated subsystem they're managing? Are they offering a service? Or are they a bunch of experts that are helping streamline teams? Another question is, what's some of the downsides to having the product reflect the team structure? Yeah, that leads directly into Conway's law, and the the simple answer to that question is, um, those social boundaries are going to inhibit the way the teams are going to start to think about um, creating features for that product. So there's a typical example that Conway used to talk about, that if you have 4 teams designing a CPU, it's going to be a 4-core CPU. And we found that over and over again in the industry. So the organization structure, or actually the term I should use is the communication structure, because ultimately it ends up being the level of difficulty team members face in communicating, which is apparent due to the social boundaries that the teams have been organized in. That's what's limiting or inhibiting the product design. So if you change the team communication structure to reduce those boundaries, you have a much better um, opportunity to come up with a better design. Can you provide an example of a platform team? Yeah, the web services team is a typical example, but I wouldn't necessarily stop there. There could be um, teams that have encapsulated a small functionality, maybe a microservices team, and those are typically good examples that can actually provide services to teams in-house or even outside. So any team that can encapsulate a piece of value and offer it as a service is a good candidate for your platform team. Any other thoughts, questions? Great, fantastic. If you think of something else, do give me a shout. And thanks again for participating and providing your feedback. I truly appreciate it. Yes, these topologies are not defined by SAFe, but you will see a mention in the Scaled Agile framework where they indicate how they found a great bit of alignment on these term topologies to the concept of agile release trains and how it aligns to the values and principles of SAFe. Okay. I don't see any other comments in the chat window, so I'll wait another 10 seconds. Again, thanks for your time this evening, and I will send out the link to the webinar recording. Until next time, thanks and have a good night.